Welcome back, baseball family, to this week's episode of Ball Talk, the Baseball Together podcast. I'm Brig. I got Brad here. But this week's episode is Eric Vickery. He wrote Season of Shattered Dreams. It's a narrative recounting of the tragic bus crash of the Spokane Indians.
Welcome, baseball family, to another episode of Ball Talk of the Baseball Together podcast. We have with us today a very special guest. We have Eric Vickery, the author of this book right here, Season of Shattered Dreams. This is a fantastic story. We're going to get into it. But first, I want to ask you, Eric, how are you today? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well, thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here. So like we do with all of our guests, before we get into the book, we're going to get Eric caught in a rundown. So the very first question for you, Eric, is what is your quest?
Ooh, it's a big question for 10 a.m. I always kind of I love to die without regrets. That's kind of my big picture quest, I would say. And of course, that's not going to happen, but at least like to live life that way. So.
That's awesome.
It's a big main quest, lots of side quests. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of side quests. Speaking of side quests, what's your favorite color?
Oh, I'd have to go with what I'm wearing here, gray.
Yeah.
I tend to. Like if I'm in a store and there's 10 shirts, I'm always gonna lean towards the gray. Our furniture is gray. I don't know. I always lean towards gray, or I guess it's the lack of color, but it's goes with anything, and so that's what I'm gonna go with.
It's awesome. I find that leaves room for more creativity because there's less confusion, less noise, less to think about.
Right.
Yep, can't beat that.
Love it. Eric, who's your favorite baseball team?
Oh, I grew up a diehard Cardinals fan.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in the 80s watching Whitey Herzog's teams. And now I would say pretty equal footing rooting for the Mariners out here in Washington. So I kind of have, team in each league, which works out pretty well for the most part, and not going to have to worry about those teams meeting in the postseason anytime soon. So
that's a fact,
or maybe ever. We don't know.
Yeah, right. I would love to see the Mariners get there, though.
I've said so many times I would trade like my left pinky for a pennant, like straight up, because yeah. I want the Mariners to get there so bad. But so if the Mariners were a beverage, what would they be?
Oh, boy. Oh, gosh. Probably decaf. Because, looks good, looks like what you need, but in the end, it's lacking something. And that's usually the case with the Mariners. This year they have this great pitching staff, but, that pitching staff could easily pitch them to a World Series, but they just don't have the offense. So it's just missing something. So I'd go decaf.
The kick. Yeah.
I love that you said decaf because I texted with my buddy yesterday. He's like, "Are they going to give us hope again?" I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "Why do I have such anxiety over this team?" I was like, "Because you're a Mariners fan. You don't get to live a healthy lifestyle. Like that's just flat. That's the way it is."
For sure. Yeah, growing up a Cardinals fan, it's like expectation you're going to make the playoffs every year, and then every few years, hopefully a World Series. And I've learned that being a Mariners fan is a little bit of a different ball game.
Truly,
yeah, you kind of shoot for 500, and then if you get 500, you want to be in it at the end of the season.
Yeah, you're hoping 500
in the mix.
In. Yeah,
and then your expectation is you're going to be disappointed at some point. Just is it going to be July, August, September?
Yeah, you want it to be September, but it's there.
Eric, if baseball were a flavor of ice cream, what would it be?
I'll go cookie dough.
Oh yeah.
I love a good vanilla ice cream, but then you get these little chunks of cookie dough that, just make it all worthwhile. So yeah, I'll go chocolate chip cookie dough.
That's
like
awesome.
It. I feel like this next question is very fitting for you since you wrote a post-war baseball book. So kind of going back, well, maybe a little earlier than that era. Do you think Babe Ruth is overly romanticized?
Overly romanticized. Yeah, I would say it's overly romanticized is probably accurate. I'm not sure. I don't think he was necessarily overrated. If you like compare his numbers to his contemporaries, I mean, he's off the charts. But I do think like the called shot, for example, I think that's a legend that's kind of grown over the years and probably didn't happen from by all accounts. Actually, when I was a kid, I used to write letters to these old ball players when I was like 10, 11 years old. And I wrote a letter to one of the Cubs players who played in the called shot game. I think his name was Woody English. And he wrote me a letter back and said that Babe Ruth did not call his shot, that he was pointing towards the dugout.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think his legend has certainly grown over time. So probably over romanticized is pretty accurate. But I mean, if you look at this, the top, like statistically, it's like Barry Bonds and Babe Ruth, at the top of every like offensive category. So hard to say he's overrated, but probably a little over romanticized.
I absolutely agree.
Brad loves that answer.
The streak has ended, Brig.
The streak has ended. I was on a 7 or 8 run. Yeah. I was batting 1,000 for about 7 or 8 questions. Okay. Last question for you. What is one unpopular baseball opinion that you have?
Unpopular. Gosh. I know like pitching wins have kind of, fallen out of favor with like sabermetrics and stuff. And I realize why, but I still kind of value and think it's really cool that, I think a pitcher has earned something when he gets a win. He's pitched at least 5 innings. He's kept his team in the ball game. And with, as like you have pitchers, going 3, 4, 5 innings max sometimes. And I think pitchers who can give you those extra innings, save your bullpen, and keep your team in the game, I think that's that to me, a win still means something. So I would say pitching wins is maybe something that's fallen out of favor with a lot of people, but I still value them.
Yeah, we wouldn't be paying attention to Triple Crown races right now if wins didn't matter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which we are.
You're right.
Pitching Triple Crown's a thing, baseball family. If you don't know about it, we'll be sure to tell you. It's a whole thing.
Yep.
All right, Eric, you did well in the rundown. There are no wrong answers, so way to go.
Thanks.
I think you've reached base successfully, safely. All right, baseball family, I'm going to introduce Eric a little bit. As we said, he is the author of Season of Shattered Dreams, and we're going to talk about that a lot today. But he is author also of Runnin' Redbirds, the world champion 1982 St. Louis Cardinals is the title of his other book that was published by McFarland in 2023, and it chronicles the Cardinals from Herzog, that rebuild, all the way to the final out of the Fall Classic. And that's also available. And can you buy them on your website, or do you have to go to a bookseller?
Yeah, I have links on my website, but yeah, you have to go to the publisher or online bookseller like Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
That's great.
We'll get a link to the book on Amazon in the description.
We
so
will
you can find it there.
Yep, we'll put it down there.
Or they can win a copy. We'll get there later.
Yep, exactly. So you also wrote and started writing several years ago as a contributor to wow, I can do this. I don't know what's going
Words
on.
are hard, Brig. It's fine.
For the Society for American Baseball Research and their bio project, which I think is super cool, especially as a lifelong baseball fan, to bring your research capabilities. I know you're interested in research and it's something you enjoy, but now that we've read the book, it's not just, it goes beyond that. You have legitimate chops. Like you're really good at this.
Wow, thanks.
So
Appreciate
that's
that.
really cool. That's really cool that you're able to do that. My first question to you is, how do you take something so somber? How do you take a story that is it's just so tragic and sad and find a way to lighten the mood a little bit?
Yeah, so I knew that, kind of going into this, that the bus accident was sort of the big picture of the book. That's kind of what everything was based around. But I was interested really in who these guys were, and that's what really compelled me to write the book. Because when I first learned about the accident, I couldn't really find much about it online. So, like, I went to the baseball reference page for the team, and it's just a long list of names, and you really can't. There's not information about any of those guys available there. So I was kind of interested in, who these guys were, where they came from. I knew that this accident occurred just after World War II, so I knew there may be some interesting components to the war there. So I kind of just started to research each individual player. And as I kind of learned about each guy, I started kind of forming this narrative in my head as far as how I wanted to tell the story, and kind of honed in on a few players whose stories were more compelling, and also players who I could find a lot of information about, because this is something that happened nearly 80 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of what drove me to write the book, is just the human interest stories behind the team. And then, obviously there's this sort of ominous bus accident that's looming in the book, but that's just one, part of the story. But I wanted to go, much deeper than just the accident.
Which you have succeeded in doing, by the way.
Absolutely.
I know you don't need my approval, but you've got it.
I appreciate it.
Well, that was one thing I was telling. I was actually telling my wife as I was reading this, I was like, the story is compelling because you get to know some of the guys, but also as like every paragraph, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I had no idea. Did not know that.
Yeah.
Constantly learning new things, and it was really cool. Like, Baseball Family, this is not a thick book, but it is so dense with such fantastic information. I'm curious, how much stuff did you chop out of it to keep it so concise? Because it's only like 130 pages.
Yeah, I did trim. It was probably like 150, 160. There was so much information on Ben Garrity. He's one of the guys who survived the crash and then went on to have this long managerial career in the minor leagues. And so there's a ton of information about him after the accident. And I had like this huge long chapter of like 40 pages with all this Ben Garrity information, which is probably more in the weeds than I needed to get. And I realized that kind of threw the book off balance a little bit. So I ended up cutting, I don't know, probably 15 pages of just sort of excess information from his story that was not really, didn't really drive the narrative. So I kind of wanted to keep it, focused around events that were pertinent to the team and the people involved.
Was there a story that you cut out that you that was hard to cut out for you that you really liked?
That's a great question. Nothing really comes to mind. I wanted to make the book, obviously it's mostly for baseball fans and people interested in baseball history, but I also wanted to make it reader friendly for maybe like a casual baseball fan. And, I really got into, in my original draft, some of like these minute details of like, his managing in the minor leagues and statistics and things like that. And he managed in the Milwaukee Braves system, the year they won the World Series in '57. So actually that's something I did end up cutting out, because I had quite a bit about like the players who were on that team, and how Ben Garrity kind of helped them get back on track, and then they contributed to the Braves World Series team that year. So that was just a lot of excess information that was interesting to me, but may not be interesting, to like a casual fan who, really picked up the book to read more about the Spokane Indians team and the people involved. So it was kind of a tangent that I realized in kind of rereading the book that probably didn't need to be there.
Yeah. It's tough to cut things. Like the editing process is ruthless and sometimes leaves you feeling sort of grief.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I probably spent, weeks, gathering all that information and writing it. And then, just to kind of chop that away. And then what do you do with all that time and effort? But yeah, in the end, you want to put out the best product you can. And, I think sometimes cutting is needed to do that.
Yeah. We're both writers. We get it. And it's not easy, and it stings, but you're right. The final product is usually better served. Speaking of the final product, your book, Brad's comment about it being dense, I think belies the nature of what you've accomplished with this book. It does not read dense. It reads quick. Right. It is. Mm-hmm. It rolls forward. The narrative is fast paced. Given the subject matter, it doesn't. There's no getting bogged down. So I don't want listeners to think, "Wow, that's dense." It's not textbook dense. It's like the narrative moves, and that, I think that's served based partly because of what Brad said about each paragraph seems to have some nugget, some interesting point, something we didn't know before, either about baseball at the time or about the players or whatever. So you've already kind of answered who you're writing it for, right? You're certainly the avid baseball fan, but accessible to a more casual fan. How has the book been received so far?
Really well. I think I've gotten some really nice reviews from people who read the book. I've had the opportunity to do some interviews and some talks, mostly out here on the West Coast, like in Washington State and things. So it's been very well received, and just kind of getting the word out there, because it's not a book you'll find in every bookstore in the country. It's in several out here in Washington State, but I think it's been well received. So I'm just trying to let people know about it. So I think it is a story that most baseball fans don't know about, but that they should. So
I did not know about it until we received a copy and I started reading it, and I thought, what? How is it possible that with as big a baseball fan as I am, and I'm a history buff and I'm kind of a baseball purist, I was shocked that I had not heard of this. And then the level of detail you provided gave me just this rich understanding, not only of the event, but the players and their families. I thought one of the things that I wanted to highlight was that the way you handled the chapter with the accident itself was brief. But I think it was blessedly so, if that is the right word for it. It didn't, like, it packed a wallop for sure. Like, you didn't pull any punches. You were very clear about what happened and how those events or that event was discussed. But how did you go into presenting that information without it being too much or too little? Or, like, tell us how that went for you.
Yeah, so it was a pretty widely reported story at the time, And of course, this was an era when, like Seattle had 3 or 4 daily newspapers, Spokane had 2 daily newspapers. So there was a lot of coverage of the event, interviews of eyewitnesses, interviews of the survivors of the accident. And they were, some pretty vivid descriptions of the accident and what happened. And there were even some pretty gory photos that ran in newspapers at the time. One of the players there's a picture of him in the newspaper, wrapped in gauze. And this was just a day or two before he died. So some pretty horrific photos. I wanted to, give the reader as much detail as I could, but also being aware that there are family members of the people involved in this story who are still living, and I knew they would be reading the book. So kind of having that in the back of my mind that, I want to be respectful of these people, tell their story and tell what happened without, getting overly graphic or, focusing on this horrific event. It's sort of the central thing that happens in the book, but there's so much more to the story than that. So,
how long did it take you from the day you came up with the idea to completion of the book to like submitting it to your editor, or even like you're like, okay, here's the release? How long did it take you from start to finish to get this book done?
I would say when I really started working on it, putting words down on a Word document, probably about a year. I had the idea in the back of my mind, kind of while I was writing Runnin' Redbirds, the book about the Cardinals. And I kind of started doing some very preliminary research, going to Baseball Reference, like I said. And because I had first learned about this story while I was writing one of those Saber bios about a totally unrelated player from 1946, and kind of saw the newspaper headline and thought, wow, what is this all about? And so I started just kind of gathering a little bit of information, going to Baseball Reference, and figuring out. First thing I had to do is make a list of who was involved in the team, and then really once I really got into it, about a year of just researching kind of each person involved, and then going through newspaper archives day to day during that year. And because I also tell the story, of the team and kind of what happened that season, because they played 2 months of baseball leading up to the accident. So I wanted to tell about the team, their kind of on-field accomplishments, because these were some up and coming prospects. A lot of them had big league potential. So I wanted to kind of give credit to their baseball accomplishments as well. So a lot of different sort of aspects to the story, and layers to the story.
Yeah, it was really interesting reading. Like you talked about, there were guys who were big league prospects. It was interesting reading the different journeys that brought the guys to the Spokane Indians. That there were guys who, like you said, were veterans, like literal Army veterans, but then also big league veterans who were in this, but also young guys who were getting ready to start their careers. It's a really interesting mix of, I don't want to say characters because it's a real story, but people, right, who were in this whole story. And it was, I don't know, I thought the whole thing was fascinating. I can't get over how much I loved just going through and reading the story.
Yeah. A couple of guys had played for the Dodgers earlier in their careers. A couple of them were, almost surefire future big leaguers. Vic Pachetti, which is kind of why I decided to focus on his story. He was considered one of the best prospects in the country. And then you had some guys who had spent like their prime years, ages like 23 to 27 in the war. So, those guys who probably already missed their opportunity. We're trying to kind of hang on to that dream and keep their baseball aspirations alive coming back from the war. So a few different kind of types of players were on that team. And that was probably pretty typical in that year following the war. Had all these guys coming back from overseas looking to kind of resume their careers. And then you had all these other kind of young up and coming guys. So quite a mix of players around the minor leagues in 1946.
No doubt. So you mentioned Vic Pichetti. I thought not only did you pay a certain amount of attention to him and his story, which I thought was wildly appropriate, by the way. that was great, given his, projected journey, I guess, what we thought might happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you made it very clear that his mother was just distraught through all of this. And certainly she's not the only one, but she sort of couldn't let it go, I guess, to be fair, but also honest. But then I saw that you have an endorsement from some of the family, some of the Pichetti family. How has it been interacting with them and kind of bringing up some of this dark history of the family?
Yeah, the Pichetti family. This would have been Vic's nieces, whom of course he never met, as well as his younger brother, who was 3 years old at the time of the accident. Were very helpful at providing kind of some of the background as far as where Vic came from. They still had scrapbooks that Vic's mother had gathered, all these newspaper articles, photographs. She wrote him letters while he was coming up in the minor leagues, both with the Oakland Oaks and then in Spokane. And so they had communicated back and forth through letters, and these were all saved in this scrapbook. So the Pichetti family was very willing to provide that information for me to use and kind of to help tell Vic's story, because I think they had sensed that he'd kind of been forgotten over the years. And I got a really nice letter from Bob Pichetti, who's Vic's younger brother, who's still living. He wrote sort of this very touching letter describing that he kind of finally feels like he knew his brother, because he was so young when this happened. He doesn't have any memories of him, but kind of to read about his baseball career and kind of what he experienced, I think maybe gave him some sense of closure, or made him feel like he finally knew his brother. So getting something like that was very touching, and that's ultimately kind of what led me to write the book. Not that I was looking for that kind of feedback. That was incredible, but just to kind of tell these stories that have been forgotten over time.
Yeah, and one of the things that has come up, first of all, that's beautiful, but one of the things that has come up, and this is in the press packet, is the fact that we can't believe this story hasn't been told before. Like, so fortunately for you, it's provided you with an opportunity, but was it sort of surreal for you to realize that you're on the cutting edge of this story and you're able to do this narrative justice and provide these people and their families all that you've been able to provide?
Yeah, definitely. As I kind of really got into the research and kind of read what's been written before, there have been, like, I think it was the mid 80s, there was a Sports Illustrated article, pretty in-depth article about Jack Lorky, and his kind of fascinating journey. But as I was kind of thinking about this, Jack was just one of 16 guys on the bus that day. And while his story is like Hollywood, that's something out of Hollywood, it's just fascinating. Yeah. I realized there were, other stories that hadn't been told. And yeah, I was pretty surprised that there really hadn't been something more written about this. There was a book written, I think in 2003, called Until the End of the Ninth. That's like a fiction book kind of based on the team. But yeah, it really hadn't been a true nonfiction narrative about this team. And I certainly felt like it was a opportunity and a worthwhile endeavor, and hopefully I did it justice.
So one last follow-up, Brad. I got to jump in here one more.
No, you're good.
Speaking of Jack Lorky's story, I mean, you're right. It comes out of Hollywood. The guy is in the middle of dinner with his team, and he gets called up, which is supposed to be the most incredible experience for a ball player. It's this thing they look forward to their whole lives, and all of the sacrifice and the time, especially given the war in his situation. So like he gets called away from this tragedy, which is amazing, but then he gets balled out by the Padres owner, Bill Starr. It's right here. It's on page 81. What in the world? How given the publicity of this story, was that guy so oblivious to the situation that he was willing to sort of recriminate this ball player who says, I was delivering widows? Like, how, as a reader, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, unbelievable that, this guy would be that short-sighted as, why did it take you so long to report to San Diego? Because he was literally driving the widows of his teammates, home. Powerful, powerful story. And hard to believe that something like that happened.
Yeah. But that's a perfect example. That's one paragraph in the book, Baseball Family. Like, that's one paragraph of detail that is in this entire book. So it's just packed with stuff, like heartbreaking, heartwarming, hopeful, and sad all at the same time. Anyway, I could go on and on.
So I want to know, can you tell us what's next? Do you have something on deck? Like, what do you have coming down?
I do, yeah. I've I spent the better part of the last 6 months kind of just trying to get the word out about this book. And you spend so much time writing the book and then waiting for it to come out, and then you want people to know about the book, so you try to spread the word on social media and do interviews like this. And I really appreciate you guys having me on to kind of share the word about the book. But then I started thinking about, what's next? Because ultimately, as a writer, that's what we do, and that's why we do this, to kind of research and write. So I've landed on a topic that I think it also hasn't really been explored in detail. And it's involving the 1968 Dodgers draft class. So it's widely considered the best draft class ever. And those players ended up all playing in 1970 in Spokane for the Spokane Indians for Tommy Lasorda. So I'm going to dive into that team, kind of how the Dodgers came up with this incredible draft class that included a lot of household names, guys like Steve Garvey, Bill Buckner, Bill Russell, Davey Lopes, Charlie Huff, Jeff Zahn, Doyle Alexander, Tom Paciorek, Bobby Valentine.
Holy cow.
That's awesome.
So I've started to do some interviews, and I've reached out to some people, and that's in the works. So looking forward to diving into that venture.
That'll be really
that's
cool.
Amazing. Yeah, we're going to have you back on to talk about that, because that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That sounds truly fabulous. Okay, Brad has one last question for you. It's a mid-season question we ask everybody. Ready to go, Brad?
Who's your World Series pick?
All right, I was just down in San Diego a couple weeks ago. Saw the Padres. Amazing vibes down there surrounding that team. I think they're due. They've got the talent. The fans down there are really hungry, I think, and so is the team. Obviously, they've got some hurdles to overcome to get there, but I think this could be the year. So I'm gonna go Padres.
I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I love it so much. I wonder if they'll set a new template and every team will be like, we just need a team full of shortstops. You can win the World Series with 9 shortstops out there.
I love AJ Preller's aggressiveness, and I wish the Mariners had a little bit of that.
Oh, I know. It's a checkbook issue, I think, because AJ Preller is spending with reckless abandon despite not having any money to spend, and Jerry DiPoto won't spend the money that he has. I don't know what's going on. Right. I know it's not as much, but man, So frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating. That's a good pick.
Yeah.
It's funny because the Padres right now are flying way under the radar, even with Luis Ariz and all the crazy stuff he's been doing. People just still aren't paying attention, and it's astonishing.
Yeah, and they just got Tatis back. He was out for extended period, and they were playing really well without him. And now that's a huge addition heading into the playoffs.
Yeah,
it is.
I would love to see the Padres win it. Holy cow, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be so
Make spring
awesome.
training a
Petco's
completely
one of my
different
favorite. Petco's one of my favorite baseball experiences. Like I love that ballpark. And those fans are awesome.
Yeah, great park. It's definitely my top 5.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your top 1?
I think Dodger Stadium.
Classic.
Yeah, love the retro vibes there. You feel like you're kind of taking a time machine back to 1965.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I love it.
Well, baseball family, we're going to close it out with Eric, and we'll be right back to close it out with you.
Baseball family, thank you for joining us for our conversation with Eric Vickery, talking about his book, Season of Shattered Dreams, right here. You can actually win your own copy. Head over to Instagram. We're going to be giving it away there. Like the post and everything that it says to do there. You can enter. You can win actually a signed copy of the book. He was nice enough to send us one of those, and specifically for the giveaway. We're very excited about it. We think you'll really enjoy this one. Like we said, like he talked about it, it was well covered at the time, but there's not a lot of stuff since then. I learned about it in passing as a teenager and actually didn't really hear much about it since. So it's actually a really interesting read, a fascinating story. We think you'll enjoy it. So go check that out. Also, while you're on the interwebs, head over to ChinookSeedery.com. Get yourself some sunflower seeds, maybe some seeds to eat while you're reading the book. I don't know. But either way, you can save 10% on your order by using code BTPOD at checkout to get the best seeds ever. Support your mouth, support the show while you're at it. And also, you can head over to Patreon. You can get a little bit of bonus content from the interview. We always tack that on at the beginning and the end just for those who support us on Patreon. You can sign up for one of the 5 tiers of support. Go check that out, see what's there. Everybody will get the bonus coverage. The bullpen cut is what we call that on every single episode. Right. Baseball family, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review where you can. Head over to social media and follow us there if you are not already. But in the meantime, we'll catch you next week.